New York, big city of dreams. NYC.
Great to be here, KOT family, man. Here with two of the goats in terms of Knicks minds, content creators, and analysts. It's absolutely a pleasure of mine. I'm coming from this from a fan point of view because these are two of my absolute, you know what? These are two out of my three favorite people on Knicks Twitter, as well as Queen from Dope Soul Sports. And we have two representatives, various podcasts, but also very individual minds. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have these two, because I feel like their personalities are very unique and they both rely on authenticity and an intellectual curiosity that really fascinates me as a human and as a fan. And I'm really happy to have a conversation. We have my main man, Geoff from the Dope Soul Sports, as well as everyone's favorite, Shwinny Poo from the Strickland and Strickland Pods. I'd love to have you guys introduce yourselves. I'll start with you, Geoff. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. So I don't know if there are any poker players in the audience, but they say that when you sit down at a poker table, if you don't know who the sucker is, you're probably it. And so I have the good fortune every Thursday night with Queen to be the sucker in the room, and everybody is, and I learn from everybody else. And so not much different here. These two gentlemen to my right and left are much smarter about basketball than I am, much better writers than I am. And it's just, it is an honor to share the stage with both of them. And it's kind of funny because it's like a posting and toasting reunion in a lot of ways. I've been internet friends with Shwinny for probably about 10 years now. I think we've been discoursing about Knicks basketball for that long. So to really come into this and to see all of his well-earned hard work and success paying off, as well as yours, Lee, and then to get to you know, be on the backs of giants is pretty fun.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm Shwinny Poo. You've probably, if you are on Knicks Twitter, you've probably either seen me yelling about the Knicks or other subjects. It's just a lot of rage tweeting, but it can be fun. Some people find it fun anyway. Some people hate me, which is fine. Yeah, but I'm excited to talk about the Knicks. I'm excited about this next season. Obviously, this is probably this is the most important season since 1997 for the Knicks. That's the last team I think that they had that legitimately had a chance at winning a title. So pretty exciting. 28 years later to be here with a team that, look, whether they win or don't win, like, they definitely have that chance. And so, you know, we will. I don't want to say that it's not title or bust in that the sense that, like, I think if they don't win the title this year, they still could win the title in the future. But every season, at least for this season and the following one, and maybe one more after that, really, will be judged on whether or not you win the title. So it's exciting to have a team with that level of expectation. And, you know, hopefully people understand and can get through the regular season, always viewing it through that lens, because the regular season was a real slog last year. And I imagine it will be a slog in a lot of ways this year because, you know, again, when you have this level of expectation, really, it's almost like you're just waiting for the playoffs, and that's really all that matters. So I'm excited for it, but yeah, definitely interested to talk about this even more.
Now, many people who watch KOT show have heard my spiel on how I became a Knicks fan, trying to connect with my father. I'm not into sports really at all. Basketball is the only sport that I'm into, and I'm into it at every level, from AAU to high school to college, but I don't watch anything else. I'm not involved in any other sport. I don't really even like sports really as a concept or a hobby, but I've fallen completely in love with hoops, more so as a foundation for my father and I to have something to bond over. I would love to hear from you guys on how you became a Knicks fan, and what does it mean on like not just kind of a generic platitude of like, oh, I know the Knicks are maybe something that's passed down, or the Knicks are the only team that, that in my area that I watch, or I'm only a Knicks fan in my city. But what really gets to the heart of your fandom, and what does a championship season, as Shwinny Poo, as you mentioned earlier, we're actually fighting for one this season. What does that really mean to you? And I'll start with Geoff.
Well, so this is actually the first thing I ever wrote about when I started my blog several years ago. But the moment I became a Knicks fan was really in 1984. I was 9 years old. It was the Bernard King season, and just to see the way that he blew up in the playoffs, and it just felt like he was this unstoppable force. And like, so I guess in a sense, I'm like you. I inherited my Knick fan, and my dad's a Knick fan, and he remembers the championship teams, and so there's that, and so we always had that. But I fell in love with Bernard King that season, and when we took that series to 7 games against Boston, I thought for sure, well, we had pulled out Game 5 against Detroit in miraculous fashion, and so I just assumed that's it was my first experience with basketball. It's like the show's gonna keep going, and then of course Boston kicked the crap out of us, but from that point forward, I hated the Boston Celtics. I loved the Knicks, and then the Ewing era Ewing was my hero. I loved Patrick, and if I will say till my dying day, if a healthy Ewing and a healthy Bernard played together, that team wins a championship over Jordan. It wins a championship over Bird. It wins a championship over Isaiah Thomas. It wins a championship. That was the one thing that he was really missing throughout his entire Knick career, was that secondary scorer. So I grew up a child of the 80s, following the team, and I just, basketball is my favorite sport. And look, the Knicks were consistently good during that time. It was easy to be a Knick fan. Like we were really, I mean, we didn't get to a lot of finals or even Eastern Conference finals, but it was like you were second fiddle to Jordan, right? And so you were, if you could have gotten over that hump, you probably could have beaten everybody else. It was one of those deals. Now it's the Knicks, so they can't get out of their own way against teams like Indiana and Miami. But that's where my Knick love came from, was Bernard King, and just and especially now looking back and knowing his story and the things that he had to overcome with alcoholism and things to really clean himself up and put in the performance that he did in 1984. Bernard King was a one-man assassin. Like, he was so good. People don't even comprehend how good. Like, he was basically taking on Bird, Parrish, and McHale by himself and up to 7 games. Like, that's insane how good King was. And I fell in love at that point, and I've been ever since. So that's where I'm at.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, so I am into a lot of sports. I've always been into sports. I mean, surprise, surprise, as a 5'8" Indian man, I'm not exactly the best basketball player in the entire world. But I played soccer mostly growing up, but I was always into basketball. I was always into the Knicks. Funny enough, my dad, when he moved over from India, which nowadays that might be illegal, but when he came here to America, he went to grad school in Boston, and so he is like actually he all his fandoms are like diametrically opposed to mine. He is a Celtics fan, he is a Patriots fan, he is a Red Sox fan, and those are all of my most hated teams. So like, it was not really about a connection really with my dad or my parents or really anybody in my family. I was just into sports, but like I don't know. I think something about those '90s Knicks teams, where look, obviously they never won the title, but even as a kid, you were kind of like you always felt like they had a chance because they were always there. Like I mean, I don't know what they basically made the second round at least for most of the decade. Multiple conference finals, obviously multiple finals. Again, never get across the finish line, but something about like growing up with a team that has stakes and like while when you're a kid and when I was a kid growing up watching those teams, you really don't appreciate like what that is until you experience what we experienced in the 2000s and the 2010s, where you're just like, is this the like dumbest thing I ever spend my time on? Like, is this the biggest waste of time ever? Um, and growing up, you take it for granted because it was just like, yeah, like Patrick Ewing is going to play forever, and like we're gonna always be in the playoffs, and that will like there's that never changes, right? And all of a sudden, it's gone, and I think people always forget that, like, yeah, they make the finals in '99, but they also made the Eastern Conference Finals the next year. They lose in 6 games to the Pacers, and so like even in 2001, they I don't remember what seed they were. They might have been a 3 or 4 seed. Um, I think they were the 4 seed, and it was a whatever regular season, but you're kind of like, okay, it's the playoffs, like they'll be fine. And then they lose to the Raptors, and then the next year they're not in the playoffs anymore, and it's like downhill for the better part of 20, 25 years, or 20 years, I guess. And um, I don't know, like something about that kind of like, I think when you experience something as a kid, it sticks with you and resonates in a way, and you're kind of like chasing after that. I feel like I'm doing like the carousel scene or something from Mad Men. Um, but like it's that thing that you're like, okay, but like when they're good, I promise, like this will be worth it. It will be worth it. And I don't know, like I guess my two of my biggest the teams I follow probably the closest would be like the Knicks and the Bills, and like they're very, very similar in terms of like they were really good in the 90s and then completely fell off a cliff and are now good again, but at no point in those time periods did they finally get over the hump. Um, so it's interesting how those things have run parallel. But yeah, I mean, I why would I say I'm like the Knicks are my favorite team? I don't know, like something about I just think those '90s Knicks teams will always stick with me, and um, the way I would have. There are many times I would have fired Tom Thibodeau before he actually got fired. But one thing that I always like really respect about him and the job he did in New York is like, we sit here after we lost to the Pacers 2 years in a row, um, after we lost to Miami in 2023, and it's like you're sitting there and dissecting it, and it sucks, and you sit there the entire summer, and you just think about the final game or the game that cost you the most. I mean, for us this past year, that the entire game one, I don't think I'll ever forget just how ridiculous it was to lose that game. But like when you think about it as a fan, like, these teams have actually also given us a lot of like, yes, those memories hurt, but they've also given you a lot of moments that are like memorable Knicks moments, and we didn't have that for 20 years. Like, it's actually a reason why I I genuinely don't understand people that look back at like the Carmelo Anthony era favorably, because I think that was like the most unmemorable, relatively successful period you could have as a Knicks fan in a lot of ways, and that's not all Melo's fault, obviously. Um, but like this team, again, like it resonates with me in a way that like those '90s Knicks teams did, because you feel like they're in that mix. They've been in the mix now for a few years, and they've won these memorable series in a lot of cases. Like I think that Sixers series in the first round a couple years ago was awesome.
Yeah.
Beating not just beating Cleveland, but absolutely destroying Cleveland in 5 games. And really like at the year after you don't get Donovan Mitchell and it's framed as this huge disaster, to win that series is like very memorable, and to do it obviously with all these kids you drafted, right? That entire the rotation is like most of it was kind of organic, homegrown players. Obviously, now the roster has completely changed, and that's fine. You have to evolve as a team. Last year beating the Pistons with like an incredible series-winning buzzer beater by Brunson, and then you have the epic, just ridiculous series victory over the Celtics. Which I don't know if you play that 100 times. How many times the Knicks win that series? Probably like 5. But hey, we got one of those 5, and that's what matters. But so like there are bad memories, obviously the stuff that hurts, and the stuff that we think about more is like you remember your misses, right, more than your hits. But like all of that is what being a fan is to me, where it's like you're always in living in the eternal hope of like, yeah, this hurts, but like when we finally get to that point, it's gonna be awesome and it'll be worth it.
The mountaintop for sure. I feel like we're closer than we've ever been, at least in my fandom. I started becoming a fan in 2002, the season right after the ECF. I was like, this is a great time. The Knicks are really good. Here we go. A championship can't be that far away. Of course, I had no context for sports, had no idea what I was getting into. The worst moment for me was 2006 when we had Eddie Curry and Jerome James, Larry Brown. To me, that was a season of absolute unmitigated disaster, as well as a sexual assault lawsuits against Isaiah Thomas, MSG, and Dolan, and just the paper bat, people wearing paper bats to the stadium. I wasn't aware of just how embarrassing we were as a franchise until I got online. And I was in a real GM group message boards and starting to hear from other Knicks fans about, and the NBA fans in general, that the Knicks are the laughing stock of the NBA. And that's when I kind of like what you said earlier. I was like, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? Should I have chosen a different team, a different sport? 2006 was for me the South Star of my Knicks fandom. Is there a moment for either of y'all? I'd love to hear the most embarrassing moment of your Knicks fandom.
The entire Larry Brown season.
2006,
like,
yeah.
That, I mean, I guess not even the season, because the way he gets fired is like the most embarrassing, pathetic, ridiculous thing, right? Because he basically is still under contract at the start of the next year, and then Dolan is finally like, dude, I'm gonna pay you like $40 fucking million to just get out of here. But I mean, that entire season was pathetic, where it was like he's giving out starts based on what hometown we're in. Like he's literally starting Nate Robinson and Jamal Crawford in Seattle because they're from Seattle. Like I mean, I can't even imagine, like, if that season happened now for any team, but especially with the Knicks, with Twitter and social media and everything, it would be the most memed individual season in the history of sports. Like it was so bad.
Agreed.
And it was bad in like every way conceivable, where like the quotes, the public sniping between Larry Brown and Stephon Marbury were ridiculous. You had the trade deadline thing where like everybody knew trading for Steve Francis was dumb, and then the Knicks still traded for Steve Francis. You had that embarrassing sequence where like Francis hits the game winner, jumps on the scorer's table, and you're like, "We are terrible. Can you not celebrate like this?" That entire season, and honestly, that sequence from like 2006, and then Isaiah takes over as coach the next year, and it's like really up until Donnie Walsh comes in, and like I don't even think Donnie Walsh was a good GM, but like he at least wasn't an embarrassment. Like
Agreed.
he was not an embarrassment, but like that entire Isaiah Thomas tenure, but very specifically from when they hired Larry Brown until Donnie Walsh came in, is like it was, I was in college then in Michigan, and it was just like it was just embarrassing to like be like, yeah, I'm a Knicks fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it was an embarrassing thing, but that's easily the worst point of, and I think 2006 is the Larry Brown year. So, yeah.
I was born and raised in Dallas, and there's a restaurant chain here called Razoo's. You guys might have it in the Northeast. And me and my dad used to go and drink beers and watch the Knicks. And one time we went in, and I was like, "Hey, can you put the Knicks game on?" I remember the bartender was like, "Why?" I was like, "Damn! I think I really did choose the wrong sport." Geoff, what was your lowest point of being a Knicks fan? Let's say in the last 25 years.
Oh wow! Last 25 years. I'd have to say the 17-win season. I think it's the worst season in Knick history, right? As far from wins and losses perspective. And we did have our own pick, but that was just like that cast of characters was so pathetic, and just from a game in and game out basis. It's like you're hoping that, like, I don't, you got guys like Lou Amundsen and Alexei Shved, and like just garbage players who you're just like looking for like a single glimmer of hope, and it's like it's not forthcoming. And like, the point in time when we're trying to talk ourselves into Alonzo Trier as being a top quality scorer in the NBA, and and just and it was just like Murphy's Law, and I have a lot of that. Like that's my sports experience for 90% of my sports life. So it's, for a long time, the Knicks were my favorite team almost because they weren't that. And then they just kind of devolved into that over, in from the start of this century until really the Brunson era began, is what I would say. I mean, I don't mean to disrespect Carmelo Anthony, but most of those years were bad, even if he was really good. And so, and we were, we just made stupid decision after stupid decision. Like, shout out to Tony Crow, but nicks and bruises, right? Every dumb decision that we made, like we re-signed Chauncey Billups just to amnesty him when the real amnesty candidate in Amari Stoudemire is literally staring you in the face, and that's a long line of, bad decisions. Eddie Curry, Jerome James, all, we don't have to go through the entire laundry list, but that was the nadir for me, because it was just like, we really, like, even when we were bad in the Isaiah Thomas years, we were usually like a 30-win team. Like, that's not good, but it was kind of like we were on the low end of mediocre, never good enough to get a top draft pick, never good enough to make the playoffs. Probably would have made the play in a couple times if it existed, I imagine. But, when we got to 17 games, that was just a real low point for me.
I'm glad we got to go into some of the dark side, as it made us talking about the current Knicks that much more exciting and fulfilling. We'd love to hear from you guys, and I'll start with Shwinny. What are some things in the preseason that you've seen thus far in this kind of what I would consider year one or year 1.5 of being a contender that not many people are talking about, but you really have appreciated and are excited about seeing that translated into the regular season moving forward? It to be a play, to be a defensive scheme, to be a rotation or a certain player, just something that's really stood out to you that you think deserves more attention.
I don't know if it deserves more attention. I mean, yeah, I think I would say it does deserve more attention. Like, obviously the Knicks trade, everything that they had saved up effectively for Mikal Bridges. I think even his biggest defenders last year would tell you that last year was not what you wanted. You wanted more from him. I don't think he had a bad season, by the way. Like, I just think you want more than what we saw from him. And there were a lot of reasons why that wasn't the case. Some of it, I will say this forever, and I truly believe it. Like, I do think that the pressure of having that price tag on you in that first year, moving across town, was massive. And I think that he struggled at times under that magnifying glass. I think he really played a lot with almost like as a shell of himself, as almost like a caricature of the type of player he's supposed to be. And yes, he did have some big moments last year, which I think can get forgotten, not just in the Boston series, obviously those two massive plays he makes.
Yeah.
But in the regular season, he had several game-winning kind of defensive stops. He had the one against Chicago. He had one against Memphis. He had one against Brooklyn. I don't want to go on and on about it, but he did have moments, but they were just moments, and they were like, it never felt sustained. It never felt like, and the one time, there were a couple times where it felt like, okay, maybe he's turning the corner, and then it just didn't happen. Like in December, where he has that huge game on Christmas Day, and you're like, okay, he's finally arrived, and then it doesn't really take off from there. And then when Brunson got injured, and him and OG got to do a little bit more, on ball, you were like, okay, like now, we can blend all this together, and that just didn't happen. And I do think that for him, probably more so than anybody else in this team, a coaching change was necessary. And is that fair to Tom Thibodeau? Maybe not. But you know what? Like, that's the business you're in. And that's what the money is for. To quote Donald Draper, like, you get paid, and it's on you to make things work. And part of that is getting the most out of the players that the front office acquires. And whether you think they overpaid for Mikal Bridges or not, and I do think they overpaid for Mikal Bridges, I think even, again, I would say his biggest critic would say that, yes, like, it's incumbent upon the coach. And I think a different coach may have been able to get more out of him. And I think we are going to see that this year. And that is probably what I think people are not discussing enough of in the preseason. I would say, like, it's preseason, so take it all with a grain of salt. But I think Mikal Bridges has looked, he's definitely locked in. He looks like he is moving better than he ever did last season. He's definitely more energized. I think the fact that, again, like at the end of the day, your crunch time offense is and always should be get Jalen Brunson the motherfucking ball and clear it out. Like that really should be your crunch time offense largely. But being engaged, keeping guys engaged over the course of 48 minutes, making them feel like they're part of something and that they're empowered to be decision maker and have some kind of have agency in how things are going. I think you can already see that he is more involved in the initial operations of the offense in the half court and all of that. And I think because of that, you're going to get more out of him defensively. I thought yesterday, like, again, you're playing Charlotte, Skeleton Crew's Charlotte team, but the plays that were really impressive to me were ones where he would have a turnover and then he runs back and pokes the ball away from Colin Sexton from behind, or he misses a shot, they get a chance in transition, he gets back and stuffs again Colin Sexton. Like those are the plays that I think show me a guy who is energized, and I think that's going to translate and yield big dividends for the Knicks. And they're going to get the guy that they trade for. And I will also say, like, I think there is some form for this in some of these big trades, right? Like, you look back at the Rudy Gobert trade for the Minnesota Timberwolves. That first year with him, I mean, it looked like a disaster. And everybody was like, oh my God, they overpaid. They ruined their franchise for Rudy Gobert. And, did they overpay for Rudy Gobert? Yeah, absolutely. I think they overpaid for Rudy Gobert. But then you fast forward to the second season, and they win 57 games or whatever it was. They're three-way tie at the top of the Western Conference. They end up going to the conference finals. So, I think that price tag can really weigh down guys in their first year in these new places, and it takes time to adjust and adapt. And yeah, he's played with Jalen Brunson, he's played with Josh Hart before, and whatever. But like, this is not college. It is different. And, Mikal Bridges did not come to New York, and he's not a player anymore that just stands in the corner and watches Chris Paul and Devin Booker, do whatever and like play defense and hit corner threes. Like, he has become more as a player, and the Knicks did not do a good enough job of extracting that from him last year. And that falls on Tom Thibodeau, and that is the biggest change. I think that is one of the biggest reasons that they made a coaching change, because they knew they needed to be more creative, be more diverse offensively to get the most out of the players they've acquired. And it's not just Mikal Bridges. You look at a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns as well, which is weird to say given that he had such a great season last year. But I think there's more that they can get from him, maybe not on an individual level, but in what he can offer as a weapon to open up the play for others. And I think, again, like, I think Mikal Bridges is the guy, though, that I don't know if we're talking about. Maybe Knicks fans are talking enough about it. I do not think that, when you listen to various NBA podcasts and whatever, I don't think that's getting discussed enough. And I think that will be a major talking point in national media a month from now, when it's like, oh, wow, Mikal Bridges, like, this is the guy the Knicks traded for.
Beautifully said. I think that entire soliloquy was a great example of why I wanted to finally pod with Shwinny Poo, because the articulation, the creativity, the staying on a tape, not caring what any kind of response would be, but really speaking from the heart, and speaking from a heart that's informed as well, and giving great examples, I thought, in last night's game on, even if he's not that 5-pitch player in a shot that he takes and he misses it, he proves that value in the defensive acumen that he brings on the other side of the floor to make up for it. That's going to translate come playoff time. And he showed last year he's a playoff riser. The regular season really doesn't matter, because he's someone you can depend on in the postseason. Mine, before I go to Jeff, is Mohamed Diawara, already starting the colt. I'm ready to put on my Nikes and get into bed and take my cyanide pill. to go to the spaceship to whatever planet he's from, because the action that they showed last night, I talked about this in a pod, they were putting him in that nail position that you saw Anthony Davis in last year with Dallas. Anytime you have an elite defensive bid, they usually operate defensively at the nail because they're able to cover the most space. And whatever switch happens above the break, they're able to crash out and defend the perimeter, or then backpedal and get in the drop coverage. And Mike Brown had Diawara in that action last night, and he kind of has that Lamar Odom. I called him dollar store Lamar Odom. I didn't mean that as a slight. I meant that because he has the body and the physicality, a bid, but he has the playmaking chops, the vision, and the awareness of a wing. And I like the fact that if he's in that nail and he's doing all his dribble handoffs were super clean last night at that nail action, that allows him to then turn around and cut to the basket or to get the ball back on a switch and then push that mid shot or that floater shot, which he has in his bag, which that's the prime area. If our shooters are really crashing onto the corners, that's going to be wide open. So a lot of actions going to be activated there in that mid-range spot. I think the Knicks are really going to utilize the mid-range. And Diawara showed, I think he could crack the rotation, and he should crack the rotation this season based on matchups and opportunities. So Diawara is someone that Net fans in the know, we're all hoop heads. We all see the vision, but I'm really all in on him. It's the first kid that I've completely drank the delirium or whatever you want, delusion on him. He's a kid I think should play a lot this season. Jeff, what do you think, buddy?
Well, a couple of things. So Shwinny and I actually have more in common than just the Knicks. We actually both got our degrees in economics, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's more familiar with the concept of a sunk cost. And so you can't change what we traded for Bridges like that. You know, at this point, it's a sunk cost. You just have to live with it, right? And so I thought it was an overpay at the time. I said so. I continue to think we paid too much because I don't think he's an all-star player, and I think you paid an all-star price tag for him. At the same time, I kind of agree with Shwinny. I think he showed that he's kind of ready to have a breakout season with the Knicks and do a lot more. And I think he's going to be asked to do a lot more. I think that he kind of did what Tom Thibodeau asked him to do, which was kind of an underutilization of his skill set. So I think we're already seeing an uptick in his aggressiveness on the offensive end. And I think that's really good to see. But if you'll permit me, Lee, I kind of want to borrow from you and an article that you wrote recently and say that my biggest thing that I saw that I'm looking forward to from the preseason is Mitchell Robinson. Like Mitchell Robinson healthy is a game changer for this team. He does quite a bit on this team that nobody really talks about because, you know, he's not in fact, as far as centers go, you're not going to probably put him in the top 15 because he's not even a double-double guy, right? He doesn't play more than 26 minutes per game historically, but it's very rare in the NBA that you have a guy who creates offensive gravity because of their ability to offensive rebound. Like he can go to the dunker spot and people are going to flock to him because they don't want him getting the easy rebound and putback or the easy rebound and the kick out, which he's very good at, especially to the corners. They don't want to see that. So he creates gravity just by doing that. And so when you put him or surround him by the players that we have, and you're talking about, you know, a movement offense and cutting, he's going to create space, even though he's not really a plus offensive player in the way that most of us imagine it. Now, I do think that the lob threat, the vertical threat, which is one of the things that you talked about in your article extensively, I think that could be a big part of our offense. Like if we can see the floor and just get, you know, pick and roll with him and just, you know, throw the ball up and let him throw it down, I think that's going to be I think that's going to be instrumental in this team's long-term success. And really, the defense is just incredible. The way that he can move is that the sequence at the end of the Celtics game where he like literally guarded all 5 players on the floor. Like I've never seen a defensive sequence from anybody like that. And like, that was one of the things that excited me when he's my favorite Knick, by the way, full disclosure. Like I'm totally, biased when it comes to Mitchell Robinson. I'm not even going to deny it, but what I will say is that he provides that he is provides Cat with insurance defensively, right? He allows him to kind of not have to be relied upon. Towns is a terrible rim protector, and that's the problem with the 5-out, with him in there. But you can run 5-out concepts even with Mitchell Robinson, in spite of the fact that he's not a shooter, just because of his rebounding, and that's incredible. And so I also think that between he, OG, and Bridges, you really have 3 outstanding defenders on the floor at the same time. And if you throw McBride in that lineup somewhere, either for Brunson or for Cat as a sub, I'm not talking about starters, but I'm just talking about a few minutes to give. You can really have a really solid defensive lineup out there with 4 guys. You're gonna have Deuce at the point of attack, which puts everybody else kind of in their natural positions, and then you can either hide whomever between Brunson or Towns pretty easily in that 5th spot schematically. So I think that he gives us a lot of options, a lot of versatility, and a lot of flexibility. And I think the Knicks understand that, and I think that's why you're going to see the load management like he's a Kawhi Leonard or a Joel Embiid, and that's something that this Knicks team has never done before. So it's, not playing second games of back-to-backs, which means guys like Ariel Hukporti, Mohamed Diawara, we don't have a lot of depth from the bigs. Those guys might get opportunities to play and to shine in 82 game journey. So to me, and the ambulance is always behind Robinson like a specter, like the angel of death. But look, we have to be realistic about it, right? He plays hard, but he gets hurt, and so but as long as he's healthy, he gives us a dimension that nobody else on this roster does, just because of his elite rim protection and defensive skill, and combined with his elite offensive rebounding. So
very well said, Geoff. And you know what? I'm gonna start taking you to task every time you start being a little bit too humble, bro. You shouldn't degrade yourself so much. You're one of the smartest basketball minds in this game as well. So I always appreciate your humility and the love that you share. But you should give yourself some love too. You're absolutely a great basketball mind, and that was a great take. Now, Tibbs to Mike Brown. Sure that we all share the same opinion. It's an upgrade in certain ways, but maybe a downgrade in 1 or 2 ways as well. What was your initial reaction to Mike Brown being hired, and what were 1 or 2 or 3, if you have them, things you were the most concerned about with his previous history? And Geoff, I'll start with you on this one. When he was announced as a new head coach taking over from Tom Thibodeau.
Well, this is going to sound weird because we got killed for it in the media, but I actually like the process. Like, you're going to make the change. Don't just make an immediate hire. Let's look at all of the prospects who are out there, all the candidates who are out there, even some outside the box, maybe even some who are on other teams. And oh, by the way, every coach that we talked about received an extension from their team. So I thought that was kind of
every
hilarious.
one of them.
But I like the process. Like, if you're going to do a search, do a thorough search. Look through, interview, cast as wide a net as possible, interview the best candidates, and come up with a guy who you feel like is going to be the best fit. And look, when Thibodeau was hired, I wanted Kenny Atkinson. That was the guy that I thought, because I thought we had a younger team, and I thought that Atkinson would do a better job of developing those young players. But I actually think that Thibodeau did an unbelievable job of developing young players, because I'm not of the mindset that you have to be on the court to develop as a young player. I think a lot of your development as a young player, and I think this is what we're going to see with Diawara this year, a lot of your development happens behind the scenes in practice and in the work that you do and learning how to be a pro and those sorts of things. Like, we saw throwing Kevin Knox to the Wolves was a disaster, right? We gave him as much burn as he possibly wanted, and he didn't deserve that playing time. He just, and he's not a great player by any stretch of the imagination, so perhaps a bad example. But I think if you look at the young players that the Knicks had, from RJ Barrett to Emmanuel Quickley to Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride, I think you can honestly say that they became better players under Thibodeau. And I think you can say that about Mitchell Robinson, in fact. And I think you can say that about Julius Randle, too. And
For sure.
so when you're talking about player development, I think that he did an excellent job, an underrated job, even. I'll say that. But I think the thing with Brown, he's not as different from Thibodeau as people like to think. Like they have a lot of similarities. They say a lot of the same things. I think that where they differ maybe is the offensive creativity. I think you're going to see a lot more Princeton cuts and those sorts of things. And look, he had a top-rated offense in Sacramento with players like De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. I think that's kind of a blueprint for what we can do here with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, right? They were the best offense in the NBA. We have better shooters than that team did. If you look at it, if you go back and look, we have better perimeter shooters and scorers than they did. And so if he can have a number one offense with that group, I don't have any doubt that he can have a number one offense with this group. And so I think I think that alone is going to be helpful to us. I like the faster pace. I think that I think that's something that they need to do to get easier buckets, make it easier, make Jalen's life a little bit easier where he doesn't have to carry the load for as long. And then fourth quarter time, even last night in the preseason game, right? It was Jalen Brunson time in the last 6 minutes. He did turn the ball over a couple times, drove me nuts. But, you know, you saw that he's still Jalen Brunson. He's Captain Clutch. He does the things that he can do. And the fresher that he is, the more that you're going to see that from him. And so I think that from those perspectives, that's kind of what I'd like to see. I'm looking forward to seeing from Mike Brown. But the other thing I think that he needs to do is make halftime adjustments, make in-game adjustments. Don't just rely on your, you know, I think a lot of times we were so reliant upon, well, our drop coverage defensively. I'll just use that as an example. Like that was forever. That was Tibbs' thing, drop coverage. And it never changed from that. And sometimes with this team, especially certain lineups, I think you're going to have to play zone sometimes. And that Thibodeau couldn't even spell zone defense, much less implement one, right? It wasn't part of his philosophy. But I think the best coaches take the talent that they have and they form their system, whatever it's going to be, around the talent that those players have so you can maximize their abilities rather than this is my way or the highway, you know, trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. Like those things don't work. Like especially when you're trying to win a championship. I think you need to lay into the strengths of the guys that you have on your roster, because it's not going to be easy to make changes to this roster. There's very little flexibility, so you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of guys like Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, you know, Josh Hart, and the list goes on and on. But getting the most out of those players, I think, is what the key to Mike Brown's success is going to be.
To his credit, he did throw some zone in there in the Boston series. We saw a little bit of it against Indiana too. In Boston, it worked to an extent. In Indiana, he didn't throw enough of it. And when he did, Andrew Nembhard and Naismith absolutely bombed from deep. So it didn't work in his favor. Shwinny, what were your thoughts on Mike Brown upon his hiring? Were you a fan of it?
I think, look, anybody that's telling you that they went into, like, as soon as we lost the Pacers series, they were like, you know, if we're going to fire Tom Thibodeau, Mike Brown is my number one guy that I wanted to replace him with, is lying to you. Like that's not, nobody thought that. But I've always liked Mike Brown. I think that he has consistently gotten downplayed. I think his successes have consistently gotten downplayed. As, you know, look, when he was back in Cleveland the first time, it was like, oh, well, he has LeBron, of course, like they're winning a lot of games. And I think that is easy to say. But then if you look at that roster, it's like they weren't just winning a lot of games. They were winning like 60 plus games. Look at that roster. Like that was not an elite roster. I think they were the number one defense in the league in 2009. Again, look at the roster. That's not a number one defense in the league caliber level of talent, and yet he was getting them to punch above their weight in a lot of ways. And I think he was a victim of his own success in that sense. And is that does that I mean? And now we're in a totally different era, right? Now we're talking 16 years later in New York. But I think he got the short end of the stick in LA too, where it's like if you look at the situation he inherited, which is
Good
a
point.
dynasty firmly in decline. He had to oversee a very awkward situation where it was like they kind of needed to transition and see what they could get out of Andrew Bynum as more of a centerpiece offensively, and he had to do that while still obviously keeping Kobe, as a focal point, but also keeping Pau Gasol engaged and these kind of different guys and Odom, and that's not an easy position that he was put in, and yet, I would say that he did a pretty admirable job there, and sure, did they win anything fantastic? No, I think they won 50 games, then they lost in the first round to OKC, who we would then go on to discover, like, oh, actually, OKC is really good. Um, but again, look, they lost in the second round the year before, and they got swept. Like that team was just in a position of transition, and he became kind of a scapegoat. Right? They start off the next year. They're 0-4, and he immediately gets fired, and you could see that coming a mile away during that
Yeah.
training camp. He should have never gone back to Cleveland the second time. That was just a disaster situation. And then the next situation he gets is Sacramento, which is a disaster in its own way in terms of like obviously the ownership. But I think he did the best you could really expect. And if you look at the roster, one thing I will always say is like as good of a job as I think Tom Thibodeau did, this front office consistently pushed the envelope in evolving the roster and shaping the roster and trying to keep progressing forward. That Kings front office, like Mike Brown, sets a really high floor for them in year one, and then you look at how they manage the roster from that point until he gets fired, and really the last 2 years, and it's a disaster. I mean, it's a total disaster. So you know, Mike Brown now comes to New York again. There's no chance. I would not tell anybody that he was my number one choice or anything like that. To be fair, I didn't really have a strong opinion on who the next coach should be because I don't think you need to have the next coach in mind to make the decision that Tom Thibodeau is no longer the right coach for you. I think those are independent decisions. There are always quality basketball minds available. There are always quality coaches available. That doesn't mean they're easy to find, but they are always out there. And we see that year after year after year. And, I think Tom Thibodeau pushed the team as far as he could take them. But this group, he was never going to be the coach to get the most out of it. They needed somebody who has a little bit more creativity. I think they needed somebody who has a little bit more of the personal human touch to him as a coach. For all of his good qualities as a head coach, and Tom Thibodeau has many, I don't think that bonding with players and really forget bonding because I think that is an overblown element. But the idea of as a coach, part of your job is to get players to sacrifice and to buy in to what you're selling them. And with Tom Thibodeau, I don't think there was any. He's not much of a salesman. Let's put it that way. Tom Thibodeau is like the price. This is the price. Do you want the thing or not want the thing? And that's it. Get off the lot or not. And he's just telling you what what is. He's not bargaining with you. He is not having a conversation with you as a player. He is telling you this is what is reality, and this is how we're going to play, and this is your role, and there's no discussion about it. Um, and I think that is not what this group needed anymore. I think you could see that last year. It was so obvious how frustrated at times Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, I think Karl-Anthony Towns at various points. There's that Lakers game last year in LA where down the stretch of the game, Karl-Anthony Towns just spotting up in the corner so that they can use Josh Hart as the roll man because there's no other way to use Josh Hart effectively offensively in that situation, or at least not one that Tom Thibodeau could scheme up. And when you see things like that is a problem. Like when you're all NBA, offensive powerhouse center is being sacrificed to keep Josh Hart on the floor, and is effectively a spectator, that's a problem. So
Excellent.
I think Mike Brown is being brought in because of his, like Jeff mentioned, I think there's actually quite a bit of similarities in terms of the things that he preaches um as Thibodeau, as far as like baseline stuff, right? Even like we want to drive and kick, like he calls it sprays, right? It's the same messaging, it's the same basic messaging, but you can already see in preseason that that messaging is getting through in a way that whatever was going on with Tibbs last year, it didn't happen. Whether you like the amount of threes they're taking or the pace they're playing or whatever, the fact that they're launching threes at this rate shows you that his messaging is getting through, right? That shows you that they are already at least attempting to buy into what he is selling them.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I personally don't. I think he said he wants them to take like 53s a game or something. I never really have a strong feeling on like what the number should be, because I don't think that I think you can have an elite offense without being the number one 3-point attempt rate team in the league, or
Also,
there's all kinds of ways to have an elite offense. But I do think that the Knicks needed to take more threes than they were last year, and that needed to be calibrated in a different way. And maybe the sweet spot for them isn't going to be this high number that we're seeing right now. Maybe it's something a little bit lower, around 40 a game or something like that. But you have to experiment. You have to push the envelope to find that. And I think Mike Brown is already doing that. There's stuff that he's doing that I'm not a fan of right now. Like, and I'm not sure will pay off. Like, I'm not a fan of the 3-guard lineups that he's used a lot in preseason, because I don't think the balance of those groups is ever going to be there when you're talking about having Clarkson and Brunson together or whatever. I just don't see that. But that is like, let's find out. I am fine with let's find out. Let's see it play it on the floor. Let's see. I could be wrong. There are times you have things that you're dead certain won't work, and then they do, and it's like, okay, well, I accept I was wrong. Let's see. So like, I like that I'm seeing him experiment with things. I think that seeing the pace the Knicks are playing at is good, or at least that they're attempting to play at is good. I think the fact that they are taking more threes is good. Again, I think that you can recalibrate. Is that the right number? Is it not the right number? Whatever. We'll figure that out as we go along. But forgetting the X's and O's, I really strongly believe the biggest thing that you're going to get from Mike Brown is, one thing I think Phil Jackson, you mentioned how Brunson is still the guy at the end of games and like, whatever. I remember Phil Jackson talking about like, how did he sell the triangle to Michael Jordan? And it was just like, look, the system, like, you're Michael Jordan no matter what the hell we do. Like, you're going to get your numbers no matter what we do. It does not matter. You are, the best player in the league. But like, for those first 42 minutes, we need to have the system so that, like Horace Grant can get his, and Will Perdue can get touches, and Bill Perdue and Bill Cartwright feels part of the system, and whatever. Like that the system is for those guys to be part of the process and be engaged, and that will yield dividends in ways that maybe you don't feel in the moment are worthwhile, but will be when we look back and we look at the collective unit we have built. And I think getting that type of buy-in is where you're going to, in the long term, get the benefit from Mike Brown, where it's like, is this, maybe Brunson's numbers don't look all that different. But I think the way he gets those numbers and the way the team gets their output, the process will have changed. And I think that is ultimately what you're going for, where, look, the Knicks were what? They were the 5th best offense in the league last year over the course of the season. But you always felt with Tom Thibodeau's offense, outside of the 23-24 season, you look at the history of his teams in the playoffs, his offenses consistently play well below the level they played at in the regular season. And it's because ultimately his offense is very simplistic. And, there is beauty in simplicity, but at the top level, when you're playing these elite NBA teams in the conference finals and NBA finals, hopefully, it can't just be steady diet of Brunson pick and rolls, ISOs for Cat, and we try and beat them up on the glass. Like there has to be more tools that you have at your disposal. And I think developing that is a process that takes time and it takes investment. It takes investment on the court through the course of the season. And I think all of that in totality is what Mike Brown is here to do. And I think you're already seeing evidence of working toward that.
You said a lot. Most I agree with, especially the criticism of how Josh Hart was utilized by Tom Thibodeau last year. I thought it allowed the opposing team, and they did this to put their center on him and neutralize him, which then makes Cat like how KP was using Dallas as a catch and shoot corner option, which is a denigration of the 3-level scoring he brings to any playoff series, as he showed against Detroit. I'm going to go on a limb here. I'm going to get a little delusional. I think the New York Knicks don't win the NBA championship this season. I think that's absolutely going to happen for many reasons. You guys explained both the offensive flexibility, Jalen Brunson being Jalen Brunson. He's a guy I absolutely believe in as a closer who can win you a chip, a la Isaiah Thomas, Steph Curry, a small guard that has a big game and really enjoys and thrives in those clutch moments, but also the finally addressing the depth. Jordan Clarkson is a very aggravating piece. Me and Geoff have gone back and forth as recent as yesterday on the merits of Jordan Clarkson. I'm a big fan of him. I think every team that has that version of him to some extent that's won a championship, whether it was Barbosa with Golden State, and then later on, what's a dude who's now in New Orleans that was Draymond Green punched in the face. They had him for a little while as well. The Bruce Brown, like those guys that like take really bad shots, but when they go in, usually it goes in at the most opportune time. So I think we're going to win the chip. There's lots of parity, lots of equity across the NBA. Do y'all agree? Why? Why not? Am I delusional? Am I maybe going too far? I definitely want to hear whoever wants to take the floor first to contend my take.
I don't think they will win the championship, but I do think they'll make the finals. I just think OKC, I still think they need. And maybe they can find it in season. Maybe they'll develop it. Maybe I'm underestimating what Mike Brown's system can bring out of the overall group. I still feel like they need one more guy that can really get into the paint and create consistently. Jordan Clarkson can do it. I'm not sure how. I don't know that he can stick on the floor in a series against a team like OKC. But like again, they're in the ball, like they're in the. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's actually a completely reasonable take to be like the Knicks will win the championship. We're not talking about delusion here. This is one of the I think they're the 4th favorite right now, betting favorite in the league. I believe in order it's OKC, Cleveland, Denver, and then New York. They're the 2nd favorite in the East. I think they have every chance to win a championship. And again, like. You have to just, if you're in the mix consistently, you always have a chance. And sometimes things break in your favor, and sometimes you just get hot at the right time. Like, I think a lot of what happened for Indiana this year or this past season was they got hot at the right time. Like, you look at their regular season, I mean, I would say halfway through, maybe even like 60% of the way through the season, they looked like, oh yeah, last year was a cute story, but like they're not really a conference finals level team as we all suspected. And then it started clicking for them and they hit a higher gear and they get hot. And they, you know what? They got a little lucky too. They played a Cleveland team that had a bunch of injuries throughout the course of that series. But guess what? That's the game. That's everybody has excuses, right? Injuries are part of it. And you have to overcome it or you lose. Like, I never begrudged the Pacers beating us in the 2024 playoffs because, yeah, it sucks that the Knicks had injuries, but that's the Knicks' problem. That sucks for the Knicks. The Pacers have to play who's in front of them, and they beat us. Right. Like, whatever, you tip your cap and you move on. They took advantage, like, because we see teams all the time have injury luck and not take advantage, you know?
Right.
So they got injury luck against Cleveland, and they took care of business. And then they – look, again, like I mentioned, like how many times would the Knicks win that Celtics series? Maybe 5% of the time. How many times do the Pacers win game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year? Like 1% of the time?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's but they did. They did it and then they capitalized on it, right? They didn't just, oh, we won game 1, like what a miracle. Like no, they won game 1 and then they were like, okay, we're not satisfied with the one. They took 2 on your home floor. And that's what really flipped the series. If the Knicks get a split, I think that series probably goes 7, but they didn't. They didn't get the split. So, I just think to answer your question, do I think you're crazy for saying the Knicks win the championship? No, I think it's firmly within the realm of possibility. I'm not predicting it just because I really think this OKC team is, they might be like the only modern dynasty that we see in like the course of 40 years moving forward. I really think it's like crazy how things have fallen in place for them. And I do feel like I strongly believe this. I think we're gonna look back at SGA's prime in like 10 years and be like, oh yeah, this is one of the pantheon level players in NBA history.
Agree with that.
I think he is fantastic, and so it's not like I'm sitting here saying like the Knicks failed if they. I mean, yeah, you ultimately would consider it a failure if they lose to OKC in the finals, but OKC is a bear, and they're a problem for everybody in the league, and they're young. Like their last year's team is not the best version of that team. Like this year will probably be better than last year, and the year after that might be better than this year. Like they're set up to have that kind of a window. But the Knicks, again, put yourself in the conversation, put yourself there, and then you've got a shot. Like, who thought the Pacers would take them 7? I didn't. I certainly didn't. But they had a shot, and who knows? Like again, like if Halliburton doesn't get injured, maybe they take that game 7. But like again, like who's who? If I'm not gonna, I think with the injuries they can always break either way. But that's the point. Put yourself there, and maybe you get in a series and SGA, he twists his ankle bad, and now you're playing OKC without SGA. And let me tell you something, like as much as I've just waxed poetic about how great I think OKC is, you take SGA off that team, I think their offense might be, bottom 3 of all playoff teams. Like it's not a good offense without SGA.
True.
So yeah, put yourself in the conversation, and who knows? And I'll say this, like Denver has a chance to beat OKC. If the Knicks play Denver, I think the Knicks are heavy favorites, even if they're not weighed as such by the books. I think we are a terrible matchup for Denver. And specifically, we have multiple guys who have proven time and time again to be problematic for Nikola Jokic.
Wow. That's going to be a perfect segue for the next topic, but I want to stay on this one real quick to get Jeff's take. The way you feel, Shwinny Boo, about OKC is how I feel about San Antonio. I think San Antonio is setting themselves up to be even a bigger dynasty than OKC, because OKC is approaching that luxury tax next summer, which means Dort and Ihart are probably on the way out, which means guys like Osman Dane, Cason Wallace really have to take a massive step up in order to fill those shoes, because those 3 bid max contracts, like Boston, is going to really strap them from being able to add extra assets or pay their current players extensions when those times come. But San Antonio is far away from that, and Wemby looks like to be an absolute pantheon demon himself as well. So these Knicks that win this chip the next 2 seasons before the West completely obliterates everybody. Jeff, am I insane for saying the Knicks defiantly will win the NBA championship, or are you on board the crazy train too?
Well, couple things. First of all, my PTSD will never allow me to say that the Knicks are going to win the championship. That's the easiest way for the Knicks to not win a championship is for me to say that they're going to, because I'm always wrong about that stuff. So you will never hear me predict Knicks. You could ask Queen. I'm very neurotic about that. Even if I believe in my heart, like there's one series where I picked them to win in the playoffs last year, and that was the Pacers series, and it was the one that we lost. So like I wrote an article about the Seattle Mariners going to the World Series for the first time. It's in their history. They promptly dropped the next 2 games of the series. So I have a very unique power of jinxing that I need to be careful of. But what I will say is this: what are the elements of a championship team? You've got 2 All-NBA players in Cat and Brunson. I think that's undeniable. You have you have a good supporting cast with players who like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, who I think is going to have a resurgent year. I think that Shwin hit it right on the head with him. I think he's going to be the key. If we're going to take that next step, it's going to be because Bridges had an all-star Derek White type season, and I use that name specifically for a reason, because I think if he can fill the Derek White role that White did when the Celtics won the title, I think that's how the Knicks get there. I do think that it's kind of a 4-horse race. You have to be lucky to win a championship. Let's be honest. Like I think you have to have things break your way. Look, the Pacers looked like they were right there. Everything was they touched turned into gold, and then Halliburton, goes down, and they're all that work, flushed down the toilet in an instant. So you have to be lucky, but you have luck is where preparation and opportunity meet, right? And so I think that we have the opportunity. Now it's up to Mike Brown and Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and company to be prepared for the moment when it comes. And one thing that I like about Jalen Brunson is that he's always prepared. Like, he's such a hard worker. He's always working on his craft. He's always looking to get better. And look, I just think personally, like, Patrick Ewing in his prime was a second round of the playoffs at a minimum guy. I mean, they're with one, maybe two exceptions possibly, but those were where his team around him was awful. If Jalen Brunson is healthy, the floor for this team, in my opinion, is the second round of the playoffs. And if you get to the conference semifinals, anything can happen, right? Then you get through the second round, and you just have to get 8 more wins. You're halfway to the goal. So I think that the Knicks certainly have the opportunity. I don't think that they're the favorite. I think we do match up well with Denver, but I like what Denver has done a lot.
Me too.
And the Thunder are the champs until they get dethroned. It's funny, you and I live in the Oklahoma City market, because we're like, it's weird that if you live in Texas, most people don't know this, but if you live in Texas, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Dallas Mavericks, San Antonio Spurs, and Houston Rockets are all considered in your market, and
right.
All of those places are at least 4 hours from me. So except for Dallas. Dallas is only 3. But I'm just saying that it's a big place, it's a big market. So I've gotten to see a lot of Thunder games. To me, SGA is incredible, because I look at the rest of that roster, and it's SGA and a bunch of role players. I don't know that Jalen Williams is like a legitimate all-star. I mean, he's an all-star in name. He puts up the numbers, but I don't think, in other words, if you trade Jalen Williams to Washington, he's not making an all-star team, right?
We are a 70-win team, so we need a second all-star.
Right. Thank you for putting it more eloquently than I could. That's the perfect way to do it. But, and then other guys, like, we know who Isaiah Hartenstein is, really good player. We know who Alex Caruso is, really good player. And so they have they have a lot of good elements, but again, I don't think Chet Holmgren is really, I think he's a 3rd or 4th best player on their team at best. I'm like, he does some nice things, but I'm not a huge believer in him or his skill set. So, the key thing here, and why the future is now, is that Halliburton's out, and so is Tatum. And so that injures, pardon the pun, but it injures the chances of 2 would-be contenders in Boston and Indiana. You're taking away their best players. And so when you're taking away their best players, that means that your window, your opportunity is bigger. And so I think that when the opportunity presents itself, you have to take it, right? Because tomorrow's not promised. We don't know what it's going to look like in a year, right? We're not sure how this is. In other words, and that's why I think Mike Brown has a lot of pressure on him, because in my opinion, this is Eastern Conference Finals or bust for him. I think he really needs to show that he can at least be on the same level, if not better, because the reason I say that is because I think all of us would agree that Tom Thibodeau left a lot of meat on the bone. I think that whether you liked him, hated him, whatever, you can honestly say that he didn't maximize the talent on the roster. So we bring in Mike Brown, and the expectation is that you're going to maximize the talent on the roster, and so that means that you've got to at least get to where you were last year, right? And we were within, two wins. And I would argue that 2 minutes, well, one shot really, because I think if that Halliburton ball bounces off, I don't think we lose game 2, and I think we go to the. I honestly believe that we go to the NBA Finals if we hold on to that game. Like the game 2 definitely was a hangover from losing game 1, and then we played them even the rest of the series, right? Because we won 2 and they won 2. So, So I think we were that close, and so I think that the future is now. We've got to seize the opportunity, and just because I'm not going to predict it doesn't mean I don't think that. Like, I think this is the window. Like the door is open. This team needs to step through it, and it takes a lot. Like it's not. We all want to just skip to the playoffs and sim through the season and get to be in the NBA Finals, but. As Steve Peichel says, let's enjoy the journey, right? This whole season is a journey. And I think that's one of the things about last year is the journey, even though they won 50 games, it wasn't a fun journey, right? We could all kind of feel it didn't have the same vibe that the regular season before it did. The vibes were so good in the season before it, even with the Randall injury and everything that happened, the vibes were immaculate that season. Last year, it just didn't have the same feel to it. And I think that it's an offshoot that we as fans could kind of feel the friction that was going on in the locker room. And not that they hated each other or anything, but you could just tell that it didn't have the same feel to it as the previous season. And I think that's one of the reasons that Thibodeau is not here anymore. And so the future is now. We've got to take it upon ourselves. The opportunity is in front of us, but we have to take it. And that's the thing. You go out and take it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I started a conversation with pure adrenaline field delusion, and I'm going to stay on that coat train because I don't think that there's anyone out there that's a monolith. There's no Shaq and Kobe. There's no Duncan, Parker, Ginobili, Spurs. There's no lineup of death, Golden State, or the Heatles out there. There is emerging contenders, as Shwinny said, with OKC, but we all agree that SGA is the alpha engine of that offense, and everyone else is either secondary or tertiary. We have a lot of tertiary players, but if anything happens to SGA or SGA has an off night, they're very beatable. Now, defensively, that's where they really scare me. I think it's between them and Denver. To me, there's no other West Conference team with Van Vliet out for the season. It's those two that have the best chance of being in the finals. And I looked at both of them, and I agree with y'all. I think Denver will be in the finals. I think we have a great shot against Denver, although I'm not going to ever say that Nikola Jokic can't will his way to a 7-game chip. But to me, OKC is the more dynamic opponent because of the way they pressure the rim. They're constantly attacking and going downhill and pick and roll, and those high pick and rolls, getting guys like Wiggins at the basket, J-Dub at the basket, makes him a really hard cover, and it puts a lot of pressure on Karl-Anthony Towns to be at his best. Of those two, is there one that you think could be the Achilles heel for these Knicks, and whoever feels the spirit, I'll let go first. But I think the Knicks, the reason I say championship, because I don't think either of those are really strong monoliths in our way. I think Denver is definitely a team that Karl-Anthony Towns has shown he can man up one-on-one Joker on an island, and it gives us an advantage.
I think that matchups are everything, right? That's what the sport is about. Indiana's a bad matchup for us. They give us fits with the way that they play. Oklahoma City is a bad matchup for us, in my opinion, because they're so good defensively that it does present problems. I think if you face Denver, the matchups are better, and so the odds are a little bit better. But I also think that with the Thunder, you can kind of if you can limit what SGA does in his effectiveness, that's like saying limit Michael Jordan, right? But so it's not an easy task, but if you can cut off the head of the snake there, I'm not sure that they're in balance, that they're good enough to to carry the day. But experience matters too. Both of those teams have won a championship before, and I think one of the most difficult things about the championship journey is if you've never done it before, you don't really know what it truly takes until you've done it. And we have playoff experience, but to get through and hit that final, push your way through the final door and get to that spot is it having done that before makes it easier. And if you haven't done it before, there's a learning process and a learning curve that neither one of Denver or Oklahoma City would have, and so I think that you'd have to give them an advantage, either team a little bit of an edge in the postseason just based on that alone.
Fair.
Yeah, I think as far as I'm concerned, OKC is really the only team that I just don't think the Knicks can match up with in a series. I just don't know how they would go about winning that other than, getting injury luck or some, out of body shooting experience for multiple games. Really, I just don't see any other team that I'm like, I don't know. Like, I mean, last year's Boston team, again, I think it's nuts to me that the Knicks won that series because to me, they were another team where I was like, this just does not match up well. But again, like, you talk about injury luck, Porzingis being a shell of himself certainly helped the Knicks cause. Drew Holiday, I think he's firmly in decline. And he's, on the downslope, and that helped the Knicks out too. Those were two guys that I think would have given the Knicks really big matchup problems if they were what we kind of thought they might have been, and they weren't. And they capitalized on that. This year's Boston team, like even if Tatum gets back, that front court is a joke. The Pacers with Halliburton, I know we've lost to them 2 years in a row, but like I think the Knicks can win those series. Like they can beat the Pacers in a series. I don't think that's in doubt really to me. Who else? Like Cleveland, I don't think I think we're a bad matchup for them actually. And I know it's like kind of weird to say that given that they smoked us 4 times last year, but I do think that was, and there was a lot going on there that we don't need to revisit. I would suspect those games are 1, closer in the regular season, and 2, Mitchell Robinson for them is a problem. He just is. He's going to be a problem for them forever. And he's a problem for every team because he is one of the greatest offensive rebounders in the history of the
Hell
sport.
yeah.
I don't think that's like, I don't know if I think people understand that, but they don't fully grasp like what it means. But he is truly one of the best offensive rebounders in the history of the game.
Yep.
Especially if you talk about like modern NBA history, some of these bigs, if you look back at like the numbers in the 70s, like the rebound numbers don't even make sense. But if you're talking about
nobody could make a shot, so there are a lot more rebounds.
Right.
It's
just ludicrous to look at them. But if you look at like the last 35, 40 years, he's up there with any of them. He is that good. And he changed the series against Boston. Like he was the biggest reason the Knicks won that series. So I just think they have a lot of ways and tools to beat teams. And that's encouraging to me. I just don't know that they have that one more perimeter guy to really trouble OKC, which I think they need. But everybody else in this league, I look at and I'm comfortable going to war with this roster. With Cleveland, I think they're a hell of a team. I just don't know that you're going to win 4 rounds in the playoffs with 2 guards that are, with their 2-guard, 2-big lineup. I know Mobley shot, 37.5% or whatever from 3 last year. If you look at the volume, that's not
correct.
That's not a real shooter. That's not like a real floor spacing big, like a Porzingis or a Karl Anthony Towns, obviously. And Jared Allen obviously is a non-shooter. I just don't buy that this roster construct works. I think they are going to eventually realize that they need to make a big trade and break up some of these core pieces.
Yep.
But that's their problem. I think the Knicks have the best player in that series. Jalen Brunson has proven time and time again that he is a better player than Donovan Mitchell when the chips are down. And I trust him in like the cauldron of big spots.
Yeah.
Does he always come up with, with the right decision and the right shot, whatever? No. But I think you compare him in those moments to the majority of players, and he wins on those percentages in a way that a guy like, to me, Donovan Mitchell, constantly shrinks. He constantly shrinks. He changes the way he plays in those high pressure moments. Whereas Brunson, I think whatever you want to say about him, he approaches these things pretty consistently. And you know, I just don't fear anybody in the East. I'm probably lower on Orlando than it seems anybody, because I'm lower on Paolo Banchero than most NBA prognosticators, it seems. Detroit's a cute story. Atlanta's a cute story. Like, these are not teams that the Knicks should be super worried about. I mean, take them seriously, because if you don't take teams seriously, they can always sneak up on you. But these are not the teams that you should be. They're not in your weight class. They are not in your weight class, and you should be handling business against them. And truly, I feel that way. I think the West, sure, there's more competition out there. The only two teams I see coming out of that Western Conference are OKC or Denver. And one of those teams, again, like, I just feel really confident about. So, yeah, I mean, I'm as confident in this team as I think I've ever been in a Knicks team.
It sounds like you're I mean, honestly, it sounds like both y'all are delusional. Maybe not as outward with it as I am, but I think the championship is absolutely on the horizon, to many of the points that both you covered. And Shwinny, you mentioned we need one more perimeter player. That player could be Mikal Bridges, for all the reasons you listed in that first preseason question. If that translates to regular season and playoffs, where he's not just settling for that mid-range fadeaway shot, and he starts getting to the rim, drawing fouls, hitting free throws, pulling up from three as a trailer, we could be a very dangerous team when Brunson sits. And that's really been the difference. We've never been dangerous in the playoffs when Brunson sits. Bridges step into that number 2 or number 3 role. Number 2 would be unbelievable, but number 3, definitively over OG, I think tilts us in our favor. We've talked a lot about Knicks. Great combo. We definitely want to have both of y'all on so people can understand you and your work and be exposed to what you guys are doing and you guys as thinkers. And I want to also, talk about you guys as human beings and what makes you tick and what's on your heart, what's on your mind. And I'm known here as always having my book club recommendation after every post-game show. I let our audience know what I'm reading and how it's impacted me, whether I recommend it or not. I would love to know. Like, books are very important to me. I'm assuming as thinkers, you guys are readers as well. What's a book? It could be a novel. It could be a religious text. It could be an essay. What is something that each of you have read recently that's really made a profound impact on the way that you think and expanded your mind to be more elastic in the way that you see the world?
I'm pretty much done with it, but I'm reading a book called American Kings. It's by Seth Wickersham. It's American Kings Biography of the Quarterback. And it just kind of details how that position, the quarterback position in football, has become such an iconic figure in sports, and really is like, it has become, it's used as an adjective, as a verb, as all kinds of things, right? You talk like, who's quarterbacking this thing is something you hear in workspaces. And it details that. And, would I say it's like changed my worldview? No, it hasn't. But I do think it's like a very interesting look into, because I do think that, we're all hoop heads here. But I do think football is a cultural touchstone for the country in a way that I'm not sure that, baseball probably was in the past, but I don't know. I mean, I know it's not in that level in the present, and football is central to everything. I mean, the fact that Bad Bunny is performing at Super Bowl halftime show is apparently a crisis for the racists in our country. But yeah, I just think it's interesting to kind of see it, and they do a good job of like, the book starts with like, they have examples of, he details John Elway's rise, but then you also get somebody like Warren Moon. He had a totally different experience, being really one of the first. He's one of the first black quarterbacks to really kind of make it in the NFL and become a starter and breaking that barrier. And then you get into like modern examples, and you talk about, they have a lot of stuff about Caleb Williams in there, who's obviously, he's a second-year quarterback in the NFL. And then you have Arch Manning, who's detailed in there, who, you know, yet to know if he's actually an NFL quarterback or just a Manning. But it's just an interesting look into all that and just kind of like how quarterbacks play into it. And again, like I just think that there's so much about our I just find football fascinating. I love the sport, but I also find it fascinating because I think it I don't want to say it mirrors culture, but I do think it is like very defining of American culture, especially in this modern era where it feels like I don't know. I guess to get a little bit nerdy historical with it, uh, gladiator games and like the frequency and the pageantry of them, um, kind of at a certain point became like a cover for the decline of Rome, and I do think there's something to be said of like how big football is now and seems to just be forever getting bigger and bigger, and you know, let's just say the trajectory that our country is on.
Yeah, late stage capitalism. I agree, and I love that vantage point of sports and culture because a lot of my writing, especially the stuff I'm trying to do for the Guardian, is really taking it apart like monomyths. And I use Joseph Campbell as a great example. And there's a lot of parallels you can make about the American mythology and the rise of the hero and call to adventure in the terms of the role of quarterback. So that's a really interesting idea. I would love for you to drop that in the chat. We got a lot of readers as well as like multi-sport fans in our chat here at KOT. So feel free to drop that in the chat as a recommendation. Geoff, what book is on your mind currently?
Well, I'm a Bible reader, really. Like 5 chapters a day is the only way for me. But I don't want to make this into a sermon. That's what I do for a living, but I don't want to make that into this. But I am one of the books I'm using as a sermon material is called "Practicing the Way" by John Mark Comer, and it talks about how the hurry and the distraction in our lives keeps us from apprenticing and living Christ-like lives. And I think that to me, we see in this culture dehumanization and demonization and the worst in people. And I to me, I want to get away from that. Like to me, I want to see a world where we can have people who don't agree on a political spectrum, and we can have an intelligent conversation without shouting at each other, by listening to each other, and respecting each other's. Look, you two gentlemen deserve my respect, my utmost respect, for one reason and one reason only. God made you. And that's it. Like, we are all the same. We're all creatures. We have opinions that differ. Most of us, whether we're conservative or liberal, Democrat, Republican, most people, they're just trying to put food on their table for their families and live their lives and get out of, I'm not a political person. I have my beliefs and my ideas, but I don't want my ideology to be of the left or the right. I want my ideology to be Christology. And what Christ, and I'm going to say something that may shock some of you. As a Christian, one thing that you need to understand about me is that I'm a hypocrite. As a Christian, I'm a hypocrite because the things that I want to do are not the things that I do. But guess what? The church is not a place where it's not supposed to be a place. I think it is sometimes. It's not supposed to be a place where the righteous gather to give themselves high fives and pat on the back. The church is a place where broken people come because they need healing. And guess what? I'm a broken person and I need healing. And you know what? Everybody has their flaws. We all sin and fall short of the glory of God. We all have, God does not have a sin scale. He doesn't say murder is number 1, rape is number 2. That's not how it works. Everything that we do, that all the evil that we do in our hearts separates us from God. And so I really think that I just want to listen. I want to respect. I want to take you at the face value for the person that you are, regardless of your beliefs, your creed, your color. None of that stuff matters to me. What matters to me is Shwin is a good person. Lee is a good person. They are people who are smarter than me that I can learn from, that I can take things away from, but whether you're a run-of-the-mill person living in Israel or Iran or India or Russia, you're just trying to get through your day. It's not, we make everything about our ideologies, whether they come from the left or the right, and whatever you believe, God bless you. You're entitled to those beliefs. I will defend your right to espouse the beliefs to the death, because I think that's important. So I just think that if we would just focus on loving each other, like, I know that sounds corny, but if we focused on literally loving each other, and by loving each other, I mean putting Shwin's needs above my own, for no other reason that he is my brother on this planet and in this world. If we all just made it our focus on others and being kind and being loving to others, what better place would this world be? And I can't affect all of the corruption in Washington, and it comes from both sides. If you think any of our leaders aren't corrupt, I think that's naivety. I just think that the whole system is corrupt. I can't affect that. I can affect Holy America, because I live in Holy America. I can be good to the people that I come in contact on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying I do it all the time. Remember, I'm broken. I'm a hypocrite. I'm not. I will not be a fully realized person on this side of heaven. So I am going to fail. I'm going to make mistakes. But when I fail and make mistakes, I want to do it out of love. I want to preach a message of inclusivity. I want to preach a message that people matter. All people matter. And that we can come together this forum at this time on this platform, on this stage, to come together at different backgrounds, different belief systems, different all of that stuff, and just have a civil conversation about a basketball team that we love. How many times do we just have a civil conversation about anything else? Like, I think that civility should be the rule. And that's what I really appreciate about you, Lee, is that is your focus. And I know that about you. You're always focused, and your opinions are your opinions, and you're entitled to them, and you have intelligent reasons behind them. But I think we get so entrenched in throwing people into stereotypes, you know what I mean? And when we say all of the people on the left are this and all the people on the right are that, it just isn't true. I live in a community with a lot of people who are on the right. They're hardworking people. They just want to help their community and love the Lord and go through their day and go about their business. But you know what? There's a disconnect with them, because they see that people on the left are their enemy. And that's not true, because I can say the exact same thing about people on the left. They believe in the Lord. They want to do what's right. They believe in helping people. But we just have this disconnect because we don't listen. And we so need to be right instead of being loving and peaceful and being, good people to one another. And that's what I take away from it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get on my soapbox and preach a sermon, but that's just what's on my heart. And that's what John Mark Comer's book had really brought out to me, and one of the things that's been on the forefront of my mind.
Beautiful, bro. So often first of all, I love a Geoff rant. I think that might be the first time I've really heard you rant on something that wasn't Knicks related. And I enjoyed it, because most time when you hear it, it's super negative. Like, I do all my rants on Twitter, and I might, I'll say free Palestine or stream a Democrat Party or abolish the Republican Party. And all my rants tend to be very negative. I rarely go on really positive rants. And that's a good reminder for me to continue doing that and try to uplift people, ideas, or be even advocating for something as well. And activism, I think, is really important. So I thought it was beautiful. My recommendation is the manga series Ghost in the Shell, one of my all-time favorite animes. For reasons when I was younger, and this is always talked about, like hacking into humanity, is there consciousness in AI? All those things were super relevant back then, even more so now, where I use ChatGPT to even like tweak my headlines or make better tweets. And I think everyone's using it to some capacity, soaking up all of our natural resources for these giant AI storage units in South America. But I like this book specifically, not so much as the robot's dream of android sheep, but more about the augmentation of the human body and the human mind. Like how disconnected can we be from the technology we use every day? Ironically, I'm saying this while I'm on a podcast using StreamYard and talking to two people who are hours or even like multiple hours away from me about a team that's even further away from me is, I think, not missed. And this book really talks about what makes a human, how many body parts or different components of a person's identity can be replaced with automation until they're no longer human. And the manga is really dive into this even deeper and richer than the movie and the animated show. So I'm always interested on what makes a human a human. And I think both of y'all actually touched on that without meaning to, in terms of the idea of like the myth and a person's struggle and that hero journey is something I'm always thinking about as well. And that informs my writing. So cool, man. Appreciate the recommendations. The books obviously is not a part of a KOT show, but is part always on my mind. And Jay allows me to have it after every post game. So I just wanted to hear what you guys were reading. And I'm glad you gave our readership and audience some recommendations. Before we tune out, let the people know where they can find you and let people know what your handles are on the various social media. Shwinny Poo, I'll start with you.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at ShwinnyPoo. I have an Instagram. Don't follow me on there. I don't post anything. It's a waste of your time. I also have a Blue Sky, which is at ShwinnyPoo as well. I haven't posted on there in a while. I find it very distracting to try and post on both Twitter and Blue Sky. So maybe one day I'll get off the Nazi hellscape. But until then, you can find me on Twitter at ShwinnyPoo. And obviously follow the Strickland. Subscribe to the pods. We have a Patreon too if you want to subscribe to that. But yeah, check it all out. Pod is going good. Me and Stacy did Eastern Conference over-unders. So check it all out. Yeah.
Sick. Awesome. Love the Strickland. The smartest basketball publication on the internet. All right, Geoff, tell us where you're at. And shout out Queen.
First of all, shout out to Queen and Dope Soul Sports. We have a weekly show on Thursday nights, usually about 9 o'clock Eastern time. And then we're going to be doing a post-game show, the afternoon, like lunchtime show after every game, just where we kind of break things down. Queen does a lot of good things with slides and stuff. So, and it gives us time where we kind of take the emotionality of a win, high of a winner out of it. And so it's going to be lunchtime the next day for games and, so probably about 11 or so my time, but 12 for you guys. Anyway, so that, and then I do a daily sports blog, happilyeverklafter.wordpress.com. Feel free to check it out if you want to. I'm not near the writer that Schwinn or Lee are, but I do have some funny takes, and it's, if you want any insight into who I am as a person and my sports pain, then that's a great place to go. And I'm just very grateful and appreciative to share the stage with you guys. It's a lot of fun, and it's really cool because you're two guys that I've looked up to in the community for a long time. And Schwinn and I have had tons of late night discussions on PNT about every topic that you can imagine. So it's really cool for it to come full circle here on KOT. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Schwinn, you were one of the people that made me want to write about sports. Back when I started in 2020, there weren't very many minorities, people of color, interesting people that were covering sports in an interesting way. And you and Matthew Miranda were two people that I was like, oh, I really like their voice. I like the way their brain works. And I want to try my hand at this sports writing. So I've never gotten to tell you, bro. I've always wanted to pod with you to tell you face to face. Thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for inspiring me to get the journey of sports writing. And thank you for just being a really intellectual, smart, and open-minded person in everything that you do. Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Find us, the KOT Show, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, obviously, always talking smack there. And after every post game here on the YouTube streets. Thank you to Jay Ellis, my big brother, for setting this up, making it very easy for me to host and stream. We appreciate y'all. Check out our Substack as well. Lots of great conversation. I'll be doing an interview with Shax from Twitter on his new play-by-play playbook. That's coming out this week, as well as part 2 of my conversation with my number one best friend, Ebony, Mad Knit fan. We'll be doing our continued dialogue on the Substat. So appreciate all of y'all. Much love. Go follow the Strickland. Go follow Dope Soul Sports, two of the best content creators out here. My main man, Shwinny Poo, my main man, Geoff. Thank you for joining us. Peace out, and let's go Knits, baby. Let's win this chip. For sure.
New York, big city of dreams. New York, big city of dreams.